So every day we get up, we shower, hopefully. We drink our coffee, we eat our eggs and toast, which maybe not eggs anymore because they're getting too expensive. But we use water treated to the best standards in the world, highest standards in the world to do all this stuff, protect us from bad things. And we take this for granted. We turn on the tap, there's the water. That's the way it goes. What if it's your responsibility to make sure this happened every day, 24/7, 365, for 2 million people? That's what these two people do. And you also have to make sure once you use it and becomes wastewater, it's treated to the right standards, make sure it doesn't hurt anybody, and don't pollute those downstream. So these two individuals do that very well in 2 different states, and I want to talk about how you do that. First, I want to introduce you. Jenna Covington is General Manager of North Texas Municipal Water District, which serves 80 communities and about 2 million people in one of the fastest growing areas in the fastest growing state in the nation. Troy Hayes is the Water Services Director for the City of Phoenix, serving 1.7 million people. Phoenix was the fastest growing big city in the nation during the last census. So these two people are very aware of growth and how you deal with it. I think we can all learn something from these two professionals. The first thing I want to learn is how do you sleep? I would be a nervous wreck every day thinking I had to supply water to 2 million people every day, 24/7. How do you get through the day?
Rely on our team, who does an outstanding job.
Good answer, yes.
Yeah. It's a really great opportunity to be with you all today. Thanks for the invitation. Look forward to visiting with you. I'm a little bit jumpy, it sounds like, on my mic, but I bet we'll get that settled in. So how do we sleep? Thankfully, I'm working hard each and every day, and at the end of the day, I'm pooped. So my head hits the pillow, and I am out.
And you have kids, too.
Yes, I've got 3 kiddos, and they keep us running. So we're a busy family and always moving and going, and so I don't really have that much trouble sleeping, thankfully, because I'm exhausted.
Okay.
But there are challenges and things that we're having to work through on an ongoing basis to ensure that reliable supply remains reliable. It's really an honor to be able to serve the people of North Texas with life-sustaining services of water, wastewater, and solid waste. And so I think as we keep going, we'll talk through some of those challenges that we work through each and every day.
How about you, Troy? Do you have little kids that exhaust you every day?
I got a little bit older kids. So I have a daughter that's in college and then a son that's a sophomore in high school. But similar. So essentially, you're just exhausted by the end of the day. Get up at 5 a.m., read email, catch up on operations reports, and get ready for the day as you come in. And then work all your crises all day long. I don't know about you, but for us, most of the crises happen about 4 in the afternoon. I mean, that's really the peak time of things. Like you're starting to wind down, and all of a sudden you get a call. This bad thing's happening.
4 p.m. on Friday.
Yes, that is the best. Actually, any afternoon on a Friday, right?
Yeah. And holidays. Holidays seem to be a peak. Yes.
Yeah, we had there for a while. We had a string on Thanksgiving weekends. That was the prime time that you would get a large water main break that was going to be putting things out. But yeah, a lot of planning. We have great staff that are out working 365 days a year, out fixing main breaks, producing water, and really making sure that we have a safe, clean, reliable resource that's out there for our customers. So you rely upon them to do what they do, and that takes a little bit of a burden off, and then it's just strategic planning and things like that around them.
So you rely on a team of professionals, and we all know these days that workforce is a problem. Yeah. It's very challenging. I'm sure it is in Arizona just like it is in Texas. How are you maintaining that workforce?
Yeah, so that's one that I would like to touch on. Is it's so important for us to be an employer of choice, and that happens by doing lots of things each and every day. Creating a work environment where people want to join your team and they want to stick around is just so important. It includes things like having competitive pay and benefits and all those kind of standard type of things, but also in having an environment where you have fun at work. I think that's so important. We spend so much time with our coworkers, and we have the great fortune of doing work that really matters, and so that resonates with people. but being able to have a good time and have fun at work is also really important. In a large organization, creating a culture, we have a workforce of around 850 people spread out across 40 different departments. We have a number of different isolated locations, so a number of our treatment plants are far from where our administrative offices are. And so you want to create that culture where it's a preferred work environment, an employer of choice across the organization, but you also acknowledge that you kind of have little pieces of the organization that have their own sets of culture. And so something, I've had the fortune of being in this role for about 20 months now, and something that we're really working hard to do is try to have a positive work environment at the top and then set the expectations for what that looks like as you go down through the organization. And thankfully, we were starting in a really great place with a great group of employees across the organization that have tremendous work ethic, have tremendous buy-in to the services that we provide and their role in that. But being able to really create that positive work environment where people feel that they're valued and that their work matters and that they're recognized is something that's so important in building that ability to attract people and to retain them.
So Jenna's mainly a wholesale provider, so don't have to worry about on the ground as much like you do. I mean, you've got everything from meter readers all the way up,
All the
right?
way up, yeah.
That workforce is a different kind of workforce, right?
It is, and so we've spent a lot of time. So our vacancy rate pre-COVID was somewhere around 10% or so. The last report that I saw, we were up around 16%, so not quite doubled, but up there. And so we do a lot of interactions with community colleges, with apprenticeship programs in the high schools, and really trying to build that workforce because we have, mechanics, machinists, welders, all the people that are out in the street fixing main breaks. And so the challenge that we had is at the time of the pandemic, the guy out in the street was making, $15 an hour or so. And as we got inflation and all that kind of took hold of the wage side, it really put pressure on, why would I go out and work at 120 degrees in the middle of the summer in Phoenix fixing a main break when I can go work at McDonald's for the same pay? And so we've done a lot of studies on pay, benefits, and other things like that to try to make us more attractive. We've got those studies through and adopted by our city council, and so now we've seen that vacancy rate stabilize. But really trying to balance all of those, trying to make sure that we're attractive to engineers, hydrologists, even on the professional side as well.
Yeah, a year and a half ago when we were here, and the director of Houston Water said she was competing with McDonald's at the time for entry-level people. She thought we got way behind really fast.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah. Okay, this is for both of y'all too. So most people, I'm imagining, do not grow up looking to, I want to grow up and run a big utility. It's not just, my kids never said that. In fact, I don't even know what that is. There are no degrees to train you for that, really. So how did you get where you are now, and what was the most important thing you did to prepare you for the role you have? Troy?
So my father was in the water wastewater business for
Really?
about 30 years before that. He started off in
it's
a
in your
little,
blood.
Yeah, kind of. Started out in a little town in Michigan where they ran a water plant. We then moved to Phoenix in the early 1970s or so, which then he worked his way up through the city of Phoenix. I started as a local consulting firm at an engineering side. What I would say is, for me, it was growing up with that familiarity. It wasn't uncommon as he came up through the operations sides on the water plant side that when we were 12 years old, we would walk the basin. And so a lot of the terms, a lot of the things that were out there in the world just seemed natural. And so as I was trying to figure out what to do in my career, I was more gravitated towards that because it seemed like that's what we do, right? When you go out, I don't know about the rest of you. So when I went to school to be a chemical engineer, I didn't necessarily know what that was. I like chemistry, and engineering seems fine, math is fine. And as you get into the school, you're kind of like, oh, this is what they do? I don't know. So we got out of school. I did some internships at some consulting firms, and I did some time there. What that really gave me the basis for is the next step is then go to the city and run the engineering section of the water plants. So I did that for about 10 years. Really gave me the foundation to be able to work around the plants and the challenges that we had in Phoenix. At the time, we had 6 water treatment plants at about 650 million gallons a day capacity is what we could do at that time. Using that as the basis, then the director at the time asked me to then move out and run the water plant operations after they had a vacancy there. That knowledge of the engineering and how the plants work and the trouble that they had really then allowed me to an easier transition into the operating side, not preparing you of what happens. There again, what the operations side really prepares you is to be calm, because bad stuff happens all the time. And so I had staff would send me everything that's happening. If something blew up, a centrifuge blew up, or this blew up, just send it to me so I can get a pulse and a feeling for this is normal. Because you would get things, you'd be like, oh my goodness, they lost a centrifuge, and they're like, it's all right, we kind of shift here, right? We can do all this. And then from there, moving from there into the assistant director position, and I did that for 7 years, and that really then started to introduce me to the management side, the politics side, and those things. And so each step along the way was really the basis of where I have, and it really given me the confidence to be able to do this job. Because there are some days you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't think I can get through. But there's another day, and I said the biggest rewarding part is we do serve our customers, and we see our customers every day. Our customers interact with our product every day. Our people are out reading meters, they're out fixing pipes, they're out engaging with the community all day long, every day. And we're one of the only city departments that actually does that. So it's very fulfilling.
Good.
Yeah.
What about you, Jenna?
Yeah, so I grew up as the daughter of a land surveyor, so not an engineer, not in the water sector, but had some technical background. I grew up with a strength in math, like I was good at math. I was terrible at English. My mom was a journalism major, and she made sure that I understood there was lots of growth area in the English side of things. And so I grew up knowing math and doing well in that area. I had volleyball practice, actually, the night of college night in high school, and my mom went on my behalf, and she saw that Texas Tech, Red Raiders in the room, had a 5-year master's degree program in environmental engineering. And she was like, check this out. You might like this. And I was like, that looks interesting. I don't really know what it is, but that looks interesting. So I tried it out, and I liked it, and I stuck with it. So I actually am one of the rare people that never changed my major in college. And so went through, got the bachelor's degree and a master's degree in environmental engineering. Did internships each summer to kind of get a sense for what I'd want to do when I got out. And my last internship was with CH2M Hill on the engineering consulting side of things. Went on with them full time after I graduated and spent the next 15 years there doing various roles, starting off as a staff engineer and then working into project management and client service management and those kinds of things. Had built a good working relationship with the North Texas Municipal Water District. They were my biggest client at the time that there was an opportunity to go on staff as the assistant deputy for wastewater. So in 2015, I came on staff and joined overseeing wastewater operations, which was 13 treatment plants and I guess around 1.2 million people served at that time. So it was a transition from all of my experience being on the engineering side, but there to understand the needs of our clients and help them address those needs, transitioning into an operational role to really get a handle on how the business gets done each and every day, the people that are on the ground, boots on the ground, making it happen. So had the chance to spend a number of years working there, and then I guess about 20 months ago, had the chance to go into the executive director role to oversee the organization as a whole. And that's just really been fun. There's so many aspects of our industry that I had not had the opportunity to learn about in the level of detail that I'm getting a chance to learn about them now, which is always fun to learn new things. And honored to be able to serve in this way. In terms of what prepared me, I guess I think back to a long time ago when I was actually coming into college. I remember being advised, you get out of something what you put into it, and really being encouraged to take on extra things and be active on campus and look for ways to develop leadership skills. And so even as a student, I was really looking for ways to plug into the activities on campus and off campus, and develop leadership skills that really helped me be able to, pretty early in my career, look for ways to serve beyond what my job title was. And so being able to kind of set that as who I feel like I am and then grow on it over time has really been tremendous. So when I talk to student groups, I say, hey, what's one thing that's going to set you apart? Most all the time I'm talking with pretty technical people, and I say, developing communication skills and leadership skills is what really sets you apart. And so that's been something that I've been thankful to have great people around me over the years that have supported and encouraged and helped prepare me for various roles that I've been able to take on, and really honored to be able to serve this way now.
So being on the other side of the table now from a consultant, you're a consultant, now they're coming to you. How does that change your attitude toward consulting? I mean, has it made it better? Has it made it harder on the consultants? Has it made it easier on you? Because you're writing the check now.
Yeah. I think I really enjoyed my time as a consultant, and I think many of the consultants in the room would say the same. I felt it was my job to understand the challenges that my clients were going through and help them to address those challenges. And so even as a consultant, I felt like I was having a positive impact on the communities in which I was serving indirectly at that time. So I value consultants. We need a lot of consultants to deliver the work that we've got going on. I think our capital program for this fiscal year alone is like $900 million, so we need a lot of help.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
So we value those partnerships with consultants, with various other folks that we're partnering with on an ongoing basis. It does help me to understand sometimes maybe how they're thinking about things that I wouldn't otherwise understand, and Troy, you probably have that same experience as well.
Yeah, I would say a lot of what we want the consulting and the contracting community to do is solve the problems or help us solve the problems. And sometimes despite ourselves, right, is to kind of help work through some things. For us, we value relationships with the consulting community, meaning, there's going to be times where there's issues one way or the other way, but it's the long-term relationship that we want to have with these consulting firms that we'll be able to work through those issues. But I think that's right in the sense of once you come from that side, it gives you really an insight of where you can push and where you can't, and where they said, that can't happen, and you're like, really? It can't happen? I think it can. So. And to have that little bit more intimacy on the reality and the knowledge that it is a valid request. Because I can remember as a young consultant, a young engineer, and you would be at a meeting and your boss would say, yeah, we could have that done by Tuesday, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What the heck do you think that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And so to be able to live through some of those things and have you have that feeling of you see the fear on the other side. I guess it's okay.
Put the fear of them on the other
That's
side.
right. Friday you'll be fine. It's all right.
So Troy, Jenna operates in an environment that you probably would consider a rainforest. So Dallas gets about 40 inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
Phoenix averages 8 inches a year. According to National Environmental Education Foundation, average water use per person in Texas is 92 gallons per capita per day. Arizona's 147. How do you manage this much demand with very little natural precipitation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, it's just kind of pointing out when we talk about gallons per capita per day, it's not all the same. And so when you look at people's established or printed GPCDs, it's not apples and apples. And we've learned that through the drought in the West is really when you start to dig in about GPCDs, and for us, they like to hold us up against Vegas. The way we report and the numbers aren't necessarily the same. People, there's entities out there that may not include their industrial flows. There's entities that only show the residential flows, or this or that, or the return flows are taken out. But in general, Phoenix does have a rather high GPCD, mostly because of the rain. A lot of our water use is outside. About 70% of our water use is outdoors. The good part about this in the planning side, it's always been hot in Phoenix, and it's always been no rain. And so Phoenix, the planners in Phoenix and the water leaders in Phoenix have been planning for this for decades. And it all started back, in the 40s and 50s of investing in resources on Bureau of Reclamation projects, trying to get more resources, trying to acquire more water rights than what we need. And so we've done a good job with that. What we need to do now is to shift to then get our customer base to recognize and go out and look at the water that they use and making sure they're using it, the wisest, and making sure they're being more efficient. And a lot of that in Phoenix is going to look in how they're using water on the outside. We can fix that going forward with ordinances and building, restrictions. Maybe not be able to put grass out in the front yard, limiting the amount of grass in the backyard, maybe reducing the size of the swimming pool. Not everybody should have an Olympic-sized swimming pool in Phoenix. Maybe we can reduce that size. And there's things like that we can put into place going forward, and then going back and educating our existing customers where they may have that, and really trying to develop programs to go back and change that. The third part of this is then not resting of where we're at. And so we're always out looking for the next source of water, whether that will be partnering with the tribal entities that we have in the state or outside of the state, investigating direct potable reuse, trying to take that wastewater that we have that we put back to potentially beneficial use, but taking it to the highest and most beneficial use, which would be drinking. We are talking with our other partners in the valley, so the other 10 or 11 cities that surround the city of Phoenix, and looking and investigating a regional direct potable reuse plant to be able to take 90 to 100 million gallons a day of wastewater that's being unused and put that back to drinking water, probably here in the next few years or so.
Are y'all not using that for injecting ASR right now? The wastewater?
Different ways. And so a lot of our wastewater goes to the Palo Verde Nuclear Power Station. So we have the only large nuclear power station that's not built on a river. It's basically built because of the effluent that we have coming out of the wastewater plant. The wastewater that we have outside of that goes to agricultural use, goes to injection into the ground for groundwater recharge and other things like that. And so what we think outside of our contractual obligations is about 90 million gallons a day to be able to short circuit. So take away recharging that back into the ground and shorten that circular and put that back to direct use and putting that back into the system.
A regional direct potable reuse. That's very interesting.
It is.
Okay, Jenna, you serve one of the fastest growing areas in the country, as you well know, right? Yes. Other than trying to find enough water to meet future needs, which is a big deal, what's your other biggest challenge for maintaining essential services in your area?
Yeah. So something that I think we're in a pretty good place on currently, but is a real focus in order to continue to be in a good place, is to keep a regional perspective among the communities that we serve. And so a couple of things come to mind, going all the way back to when we were founded. So we were founded back in the 1950s when 10 original member cities came together, knowing that the groundwater that was their current supply was not going to be sufficient to meet the needs of the growing region. And so it was through the state legislature that we were formed at the request of those 10 original member cities to meet water supply needs. When we began delivering water in 1956, we served around 32,000 people with drinking water. Since that time, we have doubled our service population 6 different times. And we continue to have tremendous growth. So right now we have about 55,000 people per year moving into our service area. So a good-sized city moving in each and every year.
Yeah.
As we look to the future, we're going to double again here in the next couple of decades. So ensuring that we've had different communities within our service area that have grown at different rates over that time period. And we've all had a really good regional perspective where people are making decisions in the best interest of the region as a whole, rather than what's in the interest of a given city. And our board of directors is doing a great job of maintaining. It's all right. We'll shift. That one to you so we don't get right, let's see. Is this one working?
Yeah.
All right. So our board of directors does a great job of kind of keeping that regional perspective and making decisions that are in the best interest of the region as a whole. Our board of directors is actually made up of representatives of our member cities. So I have the honor of reporting to a great board. Our board president's actually with us today, Jack May. And so it's a 25-member board, and they're acting on behalf of the region as a whole. We've got some really big matters before us here in the next couple of years with regard to regional level decisions, and keeping that regional perspective is something that's really important as we look out into the future.
For those of y'all who don't know, like I said, she has 80 members, but they also serve a lot of small rural entities in that area through those cities. So you're not just a big city, which is a big part of it. Also, the rural areas also being served.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we serve up to 80 communities on any given day. We originally were formed with 10 member cities. We've added 3 additional member cities over the years, so we have a total of 13 at this point. But of those 80 communities that we serve, over half of them actually have a population of less than 10,000 people today. And when you look back over the last several decades, pretty much all of them had a population of less than 10,000 at the time that we were created. So we're very much kind of in the area that's transitioning from rural to suburban type environment, and many of the communities that we even still serve today are in that rural category. Yeah.
So one of the things I want to do with this panel is like, there's a difference between big utilities and small utilities. However, you have to still obtain water, you have to treat water, you have to deliver it, maintain it, and pay for it all. But I would imagine there's some unique issues you have to deal with as a huge 2 million population utility. Mm-hmm. What are some of those things that a small city would not even think about having to deal with, that you have to deal with?
Yeah, for us, I always say that our size is our superpower and our curse. There's a lot of things because of our size we can just push through. The $100,000 change order that doesn't even come up, right? I mean, those things, monetarily wise, we can push that. We can also, with a large customer base, have what we consider a large percentage rate increase, but yes, not necessarily on the dollar amount. But then along with that side, our problems aren't necessarily easily fixed. Let's take the drought. For Phoenix, the drought isn't necessarily fixed with drilling 10 new wells, right? It is something that is a little bit larger than that, and trying to work through those problems. As we have pipe breaks and things like that, my largest pipe is a 108-inch pipe. If we have issues on that transmission main, that's not necessarily sitting over at Granger, right? There's not a caller sitting around the corner. I can't pull it up and go, hey, can somebody truck that over to me? Yeah. And so building up inventory on site so that we have it laying around, that we're in control of that. Probably for everybody, getting electrical gear and things like that of our size, it's 2 years out and we'll tell you the price once it gets here, kind of a thing. I think, like I said, it's our size, we push through a lot of the issues that maybe small ones get bound up on, that we can get the engineering expertise or the contracting expertise to come in and help us through that, and get the funding moved around with the capital programs to address problems that we have. But then, the time that it takes to get the infrastructure here, the input into the ground. The other fun one is we just put in a large drought pipeline. So where we had water resources and moving it up to the area that's primarily served by the Colorado River, we put an 11-mile pipeline up that and some large pump stations. So it's a 90 million gallon a day pump station and a 66-inch pipeline that you're trying to weave through a portion of town that's been in existence since the 1970s or so. And so the corridors in which you have to put these big infrastructure in, it's not there. Right. And so trying to figure out the space and get that.
Is it a new pipeline for a new source, or is it to replace a ditch, or what was it?
No, so essentially, the city of Phoenix is almost grew bifurcated. So we have local river source, the Salt and the Verde rivers, that supply about 60% of our water demand every day. Those supplies, as we had the winter storms just now, are full. We're actually about to spill here soon. And so on that side, we're good. On the Colorado River side, that's where you see the articles about drought and things like that. But that's only about 40% of our resources. And so what we had was on the Salt and the Verde River system, we had additional water resources that the city could move, but the way that the city grew, we weren't necessarily connected through infrastructure. We didn't have large pump stations and pipelines of that size and magnitude to be able to move that volume of water north. And so over the past 4 or 5 years or so, what we've been doing is under construction and design of those facilities to get those online here in the next couple months. There again, that's another issue. It's the time. So we first identified potential issues on the Colorado River system in 2015. We went to our city council, got authorization for drought infrastructure in 2018, and it's coming online here in the next few months. And so these things, these large infrastructure of putting those in, it takes a lot of time and a lot of planning, and it's not things that can be done overnight, even with as much force and push as you have.
Yeah, if a small city needs a couple of pumps, that's one thing, but if you need 1,000 pumps, it's a whole different.
Right, that are 20 MGD each, and I need 10 of them. Yeah, good luck ordering them.
Yeah. But you, Jenna, what's something that unique experience with a large system like yours?
I think one of the things that when you've got a large organization and a large amount of growth is the number of things that we've got to be actively working concurrently. So we have a lot of different folks that are plugged in and working those items within smaller teams. But organizationally, we're having to take on some very large undertakings concurrently with one another. So, for example, we've got the largest program that we've ever taken on in development of Bodark Lake as an organization. So that's the first major reservoir in Texas in over 30 years, and we thankfully have finished construction on the dam. We're near finished with construction on a new water treatment plant that'll provide up to 70 MGD into our service area and hopefully start up here in the next few months. And we partnered with Texas Water Development Board through the SWIFT program to fund that with about a $1.477 billion authorization that saved about $230 million, enough to actually fund the first phase of the water treatment plant. So we're doing that, which is the biggest undertaking that we've ever had organizationally, but right alongside it, we're also taking on the largest wastewater undertaking that we've ever done, in that we had a permit issued from the TCEQ for a 64 MGD treatment plant that the first phase of is 16 MGD as a Sister Grove Water Resource Recovery Facility. So that's another major program with a construction cost of around $467 million that's again funded through Texas Water Development Board Clean Water State Revolving Funds, and good savings there as well. Thank you. By the way. And so we're doing that concurrently, but we've got about 5 other wastewater plants that are concurrently either under design or construction for expansions. We've probably got, 30 pipelines that are ongoing. We just have so many different projects. We've got huge improvements, like in the last few years, we expanded our Wiley Water Treatment Plant Complex by 70 MGD. So we've got all these things that are having to happen concurrently to meet the needs. And we are very thankful to being really close to having Bodark Lake online, but we're already having to look forward to, okay, what's the next supply that's going to be online? And even after that, because some of the future supplies take many decades to develop, and so we're having to work a number of things at the same time. And so thankfully, we've got a lot of folks that are on teams, and we've got good support networks that are helping with each of those individually, but it all kind of has to funnel up organizationally to the leadership and figure out how to fund all of these things and keep them moving and identify what are the obstacles that we need to be overcoming and work through those in order to ensure that our region has the services that they need.
So you mentioned something a while ago, Troy, about keeping your pulse on the deal. So I want to learn something from y'all. Y'all have a much bigger staff. I have about 400 people. We did a lot of different things, from planning to science to funding and stuff like that. And my board would come to me and say, what's happening here? I'm going, how do you keep up with all the different things that are going on? What's your secret? So you kind of have a good idea what's going on. You can provide guidance to them if necessary.
Yeah, so I have about 1,500 staff. I think we have about 1,540 staff, I think is what I have. A lot of it is having the connections around your assistant directors or deputy directors, being able to when you're out visiting a water plant, being able to sit there and talk to one of the operators, hey, what's going on, and having that communication. And so I think a lot of it is doing side checks and getting pulses around and making sure things are bubbling up that you need to know about, and make sure they're not being held down.
How do you have the time for that?
You don't, but you have to create the time. What's funny is, I don't know if you have this, is when you go out and you're walking the plants with staff, or you're out and you stop with the crew that's out, they really enjoy that for some reason. I don't know why. I'm like, why? It's just saying hello. But the feedback that we get is like, wow, they really liked when you stopped by to say thanks, thanks for out here working on it. Even though it's 115 and it's horrible, you took a couple minutes out to come see what they were doing, and it meant a lot to them. Really going back to really trying to develop that culture of, kind of the family. And that's what I would say, going back to the large utility. There's a couple of challenges with that, right? When you're a small utility, you really get a sense of community and family. This is our plant, we're going to take care of it. One of the challenges with a large utility is silos. In a small utility, you don't have the water engineer of water plants, the water engineer of lift stations. So, you don't have I'm the mechanic for wells, right? You have the person that does everything. I can do this, I can do that. And so really giving people the opportunity to be able to shift around and try to break that, as well as trying to keep the sense of family and community within either the group that they're in or the plant or things like that. Because what I found is if that's their ownership and they have to come back and they have to be accountable to their coworkers, you'll get a better product. People will hold themselves to a higher account than probably we would as well.
Yeah. How about you, Jenna? How do you keep up with everything? You're talking about all the different things you got going on.
Yeah, so the reality is I don't keep up with everything, right? And really, if I was able to keep up with everything, we would not be doing all the things we need to be doing, because we'd be constrained by me, because I can only do so much. So I have a great group that knows when things need to elevate and bring those things to my attention. But the reality is that most of the work that gets done each and every day, there's people that are taking care of it. They know what needs to be done, and they're taking care of it and doing their jobs. So there's so much of it that just happens because we've got responsible professionals that are taking care of what needs to be taken care of. And if I was trying to engage in knowing what everything that was going on, we'd all be in trouble. With that said,
you got to learn that you can't do everything. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of those things that people know how. I don't know how to do their job, right? I mean, they know, they're trained in that, they're experienced in that, but I haven't done that role, and so I'm thankful to have their skill sets that are leveraged in order to do it. I think it is important to kind of stay in touch and figuring out like to what extent can you stay engaged and aware versus where do you kind of just let things go as long as they're going well. And finding that balance has been something that I think every time you step into a new role, you've got to find that, and especially in leadership type roles. And so that's been something that over the last 20 months I've been kind of working through. And the thing about it is I really love our work, and I don't get the chance to plug into a lot of the technical things that I used to get a chance to plug into, but I like those things. So sometimes I dive a little bit deep just because I'm interested and I enjoy it. But pretty quickly I say, okay, I'm sorry, I should let y'all just go on. So finding the way to stay engaged, ask good questions, to be aware to the extent that you need to be aware. For example, we were actually just talking through our capital program yesterday. We've got a monthly check-in on our capital program, and we had a good discussion on the updated IUP from the Texas Water Development Board, and we've got a few projects that we slated that, hey, maybe these would be potential opportunities for some state revolving funds. And so our team had been working through that and had a recommendation, and I was able to come up to speed on what that is.
Yeah.
So there's various venues where we've got like routine check-ins to provide some of those informational kind of briefings. And then getting out in the field is always a great thing as well. And sometimes those are like formal visits where you're out and you've got a list of things that you want to talk through that are like key talking points, and you do it consistently from visit to visit. But last week, I looked at my calendar on Monday, and I was like, you know what? It's like the calm before the storm. It's actually not that bad. And so I looked at the calendar, I was like, Wednesday, I'm going to go to the field. And so we moved a few things around, and I just like showed up with boxes of cookies from Costco and dropped off boxes of cookies and said, hey, what's going on? And so sometimes it's just the informal visits that people appreciate. When you get out there and just kind of check in and see how things are going. So I think having a lot of different mechanisms, and it's never going to be perfect, but doing the best you can.
After I had this job for about a year or two, my boys asked me, said, what do you do every day? I said, I do meetings.
Yeah.
I don't produce anything, I do meetings. That's about it. Yeah. So, but checking in is good. Troy, I understand Arizona is looking at seawater desal. Now, I love geography, but I must have missed it when Arizona became a coastal state. Unless California finally fell into the ocean.
It did.
Isn't
I
there
think
a George
Lapalisse
Strait
made-
song about that?
I think so.
Is that a real thing, or is it just a pie in the sky thing?
My personal opinion or my professional opinion? I don't know. So yeah, I think.
Away from here, from Arizona. So
Yeah, that's what I said. Is there any
It won't get back.
regulators, or do we have any legislators or anything? I think that is, from the Phoenix's perspective, that is a challenge. The governor this past year set aside $1 billion to go look at desal of something that we are sure that will cost more than 10 to do. And so it looks really good at a headline of a governor that's leaving to set aside $1 million for something. I think that's the largest challenge, is if you build a desal plant that's that large, how do you then pipe that,
How far is it to the Gulf down there?
probably
Through Mexico, right?
300 miles.
Through Mexico,
of-
too,
yeah,
yeah.
across the border and all of that. I don't know how it works.
It's a bold vision.
And so what we would say is I think the state needs to look at smaller projects, and that's where the regional DPR facility that I brought up earlier. There are projects that you could do that are a fraction of that cost. To be able to put real water into use, to be able to lower the demands that we have with a new water source in a shorter time frame, probably in the next 8 years or so. There's no reason why a facility like that couldn't be put up and running. And if you replicate that in other communities, there's lots of interior state projects that could happen rather than something like that. So.
I remember 20 years ago, I was in San Diego, and they were trying to do toilet to tap, and they called it that, and it failed miserably.
It did.
Now they're doing it every day, and nobody blinking an eye.
Right, so we hired the same consulting firm that helped them the second time. It's going to help us with the marketing and communication strategies to help push that. What we've heard from them is if you get it right, it goes well. If you get it wrong, it'll be 12 years before you can talk about it again. And so utilizing the drought conditions that we have and getting the communication right, as we all know, I mean, the science and the technology is there. It's not a technical issue, it's a perception issue. And it's overcoming that perception that, it's safe, clean, reliable water, same as what comes out of your tap now. And prior, a lot of times, it's probably even a higher quality than what you have now. And their raw water source is cleaner than what's coming down a river or anything else as well.
Yeah. So, Jenna, in your opinion, if you're queen for a day, what would be the number one thing you'd change to help you meet your goal of supplying your people with water?
All right. So queen for a day.
Or fairy godmother, whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Let's see. So I think we have a great partnership with the Texas Water Development Board for funding. And as we look at our future and our needs into the future, we have a lot more needs left to come. And so if I had the chance to be queen for a day, I would ask for even further support from a funding and project implementation standpoint to meet the growing needs of our service area in the state of Texas. So in this particular legislative session, one of the things that we're focused on organizationally is figuring out how to get some of that state surplus money into water infrastructure. And so that's something that we're focused on, is in particular trying to get more money into the SWIFT program in order to meet the needs of the state water plan. It's what, like $80 billion to meet the needs of the state water plan. And so being able to get some additional funding support and possibly even some more flexibility and funding to a greater extent than what we have in the past would be wonderful.
What's your biggest need, Troy, to help you meet your needs in the future?
I'd like 10 feet in Lake Mead. That would be a good start. We can add that. Beyond that, beyond just actual physical water, I think that's the issue. The issue for the city of Phoenix is it's a relatively young city. Its major growth happened after World War II, so we saw a lot of infrastructure that went in the ground in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I have 7,000 miles of pipe ranging from a 2-inch to 108-inch that all came in about a 30-year span. And so it's staying ahead of the infrastructure and getting the funding associated with that. When you have that volume of pipe that needs to get replaced at relatively all about the same time, that's a challenge. The other one that's trying to disassociate it with some of our legislator and the politicians that we have is water rates are not a tax. It's for a service, and it's reinvesting back into the infrastructure and the system that we have. For Phoenix, we don't do anything for a profit. Everything goes back into the utility. We're separated from the city financially, so there is no ties. And so it is truly a cost of service of actually running the utilities and putting money back into the infrastructure and making sure that we have the fund balance and all of that to meet our AAA ratings and all the things that we need to do in order to borrow at low rates.
Yeah, so people valuing water and value. It's not just a commodity. It doesn't come free. Yeah,
it does not.
Cool. So a little bit of time. Thank you very much. We have a little bit of time for question and answers or questions, and they'll try to supply the answers. Anybody? Hold on, Bridget, so we can get to the...
So what role does Manager for Recharge have in Phoenix?
Hold your mic up, I can't hear you, Bridget.
You think so? I think I'm so loud. What role does Manager for Recharge play in Phoenix? It seems like you have an active management area, and then were you getting CAP water, Colorado water, and I guess you still are.
Yes.
So are you involved in those aspects also?
We are. So it is a big deal probably up until a year from now when we actually get cut to a level where we don't have excess. So all of our excess water gets recharged back into the ground. As you might have seen a few years ago, we actually entered into an agreement with the city of Tucson to actually store water in their aquifers as well. And so on the surface level, that kind of seems a little strange of why would the city of Phoenix store water 120 miles away in an aquifer that they're not connected to. The city of Phoenix, actually, our groundwater use is very, very small. We view groundwater as a fossil resource and that we are limiting that to the last use. And so about 2% of our demands with groundwater now. And so we have big, large water surface plants that we use to treat surface water every day. Tucson is built actually the opposite. They are 100% groundwater, and so their wellhead infrastructure is very vast. Their aquifers are utilized every day, and so we do exchanges through the canal system. So the Central Arizona Canal System is how we would actually work that out. And so all the excess water that we've had over the past 10 years or so, yeah, we've been recharging that back into the ground and getting groundwater credits so that we can utilize that as the future.
So I was surprised that you said 60% of your water is from your surface water from the river?
So 60% is our local river, so the Salt and the Verde River systems. And so that's where, like I said, when you look at the drought, every city is different. Where Vegas doesn't have a local water system. Right. So you looked at LA, San Diego, they were having serious stress on their state water system as well. Where Phoenix, like I said, we're about to spill here in the next few weeks or so, as having full reservoirs on the state side.
We don't think of Arizona as having a robust surface water system, really.
It is. I think it's just a well-managed system. We have a Salt River project, which is a project that was developed by the Bureau of Reclamation back in the 20s, in which the landowners of Phoenix put up their land as collateral to get a reclamation project to build Roosevelt Dam. So one of the first, I think it is the first reclamation project in the West. And so they manage all of our reservoirs in the watershed, and it's been just active management of that, and being able to supplement that with groundwater from their system to be able to manage that. And so it's just active management over the past 20 years to make sure that we're in the situation that we are.
Cool. Any other questions?
You both manage large organizations, 900, 1,500 people, and you talked a little bit earlier about workforce development. This is a huge issue. Are you working with universities for intern programs so that they can come and kind of get a look at you and see what the job is like, or maybe even, down to the 8th grade levels, where they're beginning the trade schools? I would just like to hear more from each of you about what you're doing for the workforce development part of the equation.
Yeah, so as I said, on the engineering side and hydrology side, we have internships with the state universities where they send students to us at a time. We then take that down to the community college level. One of our community colleges that we have that's in the downtown Phoenix area has a wastewater operator certification program where they'll put them through a year-long education process where they come out with their operator licenses at the end of the day. During that, we then engage and we take 8 individuals out of that program to bring them in and give them work-related experience while they're actually going to the classroom. And so they'll do their classroom work during the morning and then come to us in the afternoon, really trying to build from our own. And then going back with the technical high schools and talking to them about different trades and things like that. I think is what we're seeing is everybody in that generation wants to be a TikTok star, not necessarily a mechanic, and that may not pan out. It's really trying to show them the benefit of what we have.
Did you help develop the curriculum for the certification, 1-year certification?
We did not. It was an existing program, and it was just really a partnership of trying to build off of what they had and trying to give them the hands-on field experience on top of that.
Cool.
And whether they end up coming to the work for the city of Phoenix or not, they have a job at the end if they want, but if they can go to another community, it's really trying to build that base.
I don't know if you heard, but there's 7,000 water systems in Texas, and every one of them needs an operator. And there's not enough operators. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, we've got a number of different programs in place as well. We have an apprenticeship program that we've partnered with WHEAT on for operators. And so that's a program where the Department of Labor actually provides some funding for the first 6 months of those folks' engagement, such that they're paying a portion of their salary, and we're providing the education and the experience in order for them to seek their licensure or seek higher level licensure. And so we're just kicking that program off here fairly recently, and that's been something that we're really excited about and looking to possibly expand. Right now, it's focused on the wastewater operator side of things, but we're considering pulling that into the water operator side as well. We also look for those strategic partnerships. So an organization that we work with quite a lot is Texas State Technical College, TSTC. in order to identify really people that are more the maintainers. So the electricians, the mechanics, the welders, those types of folks. There's technical training programs that they've got that we've partnered with them to be a potential employer for folks coming out of those programs. So that's an example. We also did a pilot program with Collin College where for a couple of years we offered training and we partnered with Collin College to be the actual educational institution for operators, so for both water and wastewater operations courses. That's not something we're actively doing right now, but we're always open to those partnerships when they make sense. Another thing that's a little bit interesting is through our John Bunker Sands Wetlands Center, which is adjacent to our 2,000-acre constructed wetlands that provides about 90 MGD of treatment for return flows before it's returned to Lake Lavon. We did a public-private partnership with the Rosewood Corporation to build the Wetland Center itself that's really focused on conservation education. And a lot of the work that Wetland Center does is exposing people to career paths in the environmental world that are very much relevant to the work that we do. So that's a little bit of a different take on it, but something that is helping to introduce the opportunity to work in water for many students across the North Texas area.
Cool. Okay, time for one more question. Back over here.
The Texas Water Foundation is working on the first statewide water workforce needs assessment. My question to you all is, what kinds of skill sets do you foresee younger workforce needing to develop so they can be prepared to address future water needs?
I think for the most part, it's just the desire to come into the water wastewater industry. You know, I mean, in the sense of there's a lot of choices that they think that they have, and once you get into that, it's you know, basic math, basic reading. I mean, just the things to be able to get through the operator certification programs that they have, and the rest of it, you know, we'll teach them. Just, you know, the willingness and wanting to come to the industry, and you know, with a little bit of knowledge of math and reading and things like that, and we can work through the rest.
There's no special skills. It can be taught.
Yeah.
And there's everything from chemistry to engineering to communications, really everything. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you on that. And something that I think a lot of people don't think about is that there is careers in water. There's so many times that I'm just talking with people in my day-to-day life, and I talk about what I do, and they're like, oh, well, I never even thought about that. I just turn on the faucet, and it's there, and I flush the toilet, and it goes. And so I think from a workforce development and getting people intrigued, it's really helping people to understand that there is a whole industry around water, and that it's a pretty rewarding industry made up of a lot of great folks. So I think just a lot of it is just getting the word out on what the opportunities are.
And it's an industry where it's everywhere, right? I mean, whether it's a small community that you live in or a large city, there's the need for water, wastewater professionals to be able to figure that out for the community.
You can work rural, you can work big cities, wherever you want to. Yeah. Interesting. Let's give us our panel a hand. Thank you all very much.